everybody, you're listening to and watching the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
And we are your hairy, heavy homos that talk about comic books, but you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in, or in this case, stream in. And we're back with you for another episode. We won't be with you next week, Labor Day and all that stuff, but we will be back in 2 weeks. Maybe not all of us will be there, but we'll be back in 2 weeks. And what we have ahead of us is going to be a surprise, I think, to each of us, because usually when we talk about a show, we know generally what the other books, the other guys are talking about, and we don't have any idea. We just didn't have that conversation. But before we get started, I wanted to congratulate Caleb on your externship. So
yeah, thank you.
And you're looking especially more lawyerish tonight. So
well, so I had my first class at 8:45 this morning, and then I went to work, and I had a 1:45, and then I went back to work, and then I had a 5:40 or 5:25 that lasted till 7:25. So I rolled in just in time to get my life together a little bit and do this. So Tuesdays and Thursdays I am in class and or working at either my my externship or my clerkship from about 8 in the morning till about 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Don't kill yourself, man. You know.
Oh, I'm not. It's fine.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that.
I'm at the point right now to where it's legitimately the school stuff is harder, but the work is fun and interesting, and I find it enticing and exciting. And well, I think it's okay to say, but so I'm externing with the ACLU. So I get to work on some really interesting things and important things here in Arkansas. So I'm really happy about that, and I'm very, very lucky and honored to have been chosen for that.
Pretty awesome.
Awesome.
Pretty dang awesome.
Yeah.
Congrats.
As I put sticky notes on here while we're talking of things I have to do tomorrow.
Yeah. So do you have any kind of break with the holiday weekend?
I think we have the holiday actually off, so it'll be like a 3-day weekend. So that'll be nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's same boat as you. It seemed every year that I would start classes the Monday or Tuesday prior to Labor Day, so it was not much, you know.
Well, and it's interesting. I was telling Steve before the show, the professors, the people who are supposed to have everything together and make it easy, inevitably the first week they don't have the assignments ready, and they kind of dump things on you midweek. So then you have to catch up on a week's worth of stuff. So it's nice to have that 3-day weekend after the first week, so you can get caught up and get back to zero, and find your footing from there. So it really helps.
Which is good. I mean, it's the hardest thing kind of coming back into a semester. Now you really didn't have that much of a real break, because I know you took, you did a lot of coursework over the summer. You did a ton of stuff over the summer. You didn't really have a big break. But I mean, getting thrown right into it. Here you go. Read all this. Write all that.
Steve, do you have any kind of Labor Day plans, or?
I plan on maybe reading some more comics and maybe tackling some of this. Problem is, no short boxes anywhere. There's a short box shortage. So I'm down to the part where I'm taking comics from one box and putting them into another box, so I have room in that first box, and doing the bump of so many issues. It's just it's not fun.
Well, I did have to cancel some weekend plans, unfortunately, because of the nervousness of the other person in our relationship, and it's understandable. We had tickets for the immersive Van Gogh exhibit in New York next week, and we decided to not do that. Luckily, I was able to get a refund, so that was way cool. So thank you, Fever. They have these new ticketing systems, so Fever, thank you for that. But that was also coupled with staying overnight in New York, and that's not a problem, because I've just because of my work situation, and I hope this returns, please, Lordy, please, that I really don't have to pay for hotel rooms.
Right.
So those points came back. So that worked out. But I do have next Wednesday, I do have Alanis Morissette Garbage Cat Power in concert, and a week from Saturday I have King Crimson with I don't know, I believe it's Dweezil with the Frank Zappa Sting opening. So a couple concerts, and that's in an amphitheater, so it's not and it's not indoors, but I have indoor shows scheduled for October, starting in mid-October, and I'm hoping they go forward. I'm hoping we have a little bit of a dip, and with New York and New Jersey, it's everything, and Philadelphia, and not Pennsylvania but Philadelphia, but I think that's going to catch up. Everything is vaccine only, proof of vaccine, and may even be mandatory masks inside by that point. Which I'm doing anyway right now. There's certain stores, I got to say, I don't think I'm ever going to go in without a mask for the rest of my life.
Well, I mean, here it's mandated.
Yeah.
We're mandated here for masks again. So, it was kind of interesting because I'm like, I got used to it for about a month where I didn't really have to. Like, I was wearing it in the supermarket. I don't go to a lot of stores, so it wasn't really something that I really needed. But now I'm like, I got to rewash all of my cloth masks. I'm gonna get into that routine again.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. Well, hey, we do have some people who have joined us. We've got David Toby again. Hello, David. David has joined us from Australia, and we've also got Tony Gilkinson. Hello, Tony. How's everything going? Hey, guys, he says. And apparently Tony is watching from the passenger seat as we drive to Richmond, Virginia. Well, that's good. Hopefully the signal stays. That Verizon 5G, sometimes it's kind of iffy on the highways, unless you've had your vaccine, in which case it should be amplified perfectly.
I hate to put joke. Yeah. Also want to say hi to Anthony. So hi, Anthony. And hi, Anthony. Tony, I should brought up a blasphemy on his Facebook page tonight. Absolute blasphemy. He said it was an unpopular opinion, but he prefers Van Halen with Sammy Hagar instead of Van Halen with David Lee Roth.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Well, there's two kinds of people in this world. The Van Halen and the Van Hagar. And let's face it. Who do you want to hang with?
It reminds me of that scene from Joe Dirt where he's running down the list of bands. He's like Van Halen, not Van Hagar.
Yeah.
But hey, Hagar gets a lot of crap. Walking on Mars was a legitimately good album. So he's better off on his own. I always thought so. I thought it was a fun album.
Okay.
Yeah. David, meanwhile, is watching from his office as he drafts letters about patents. So that sounds exciting. Glad that we could be a distraction for you.
Should have a talk with him about patent law in Australia, because patent law in the States is, let's just say, it's fucked up. You don't have to go to law school to become a patent
copyright lawyer. Doesn't matter.
There's a separate bar.
Intellectual
it's
law.
A completely separate bar. At the same token, it's apart from some medical boards, probably the most difficult test to pass.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting there. Oh, we got a gasp. All right, let's just drop. Let's not have the David Lee Roth versus Sammy Hagar sully our proceedings here. That was probably a mistake on my part. I got caught up on some comic book TV, which was nice.
Ooh.
Yeah.
What'd you get up to?
I watched Supergirl. I watched Stargirl. I just finished Titans, this week's Titans. I watched Legends. I watched What If. I'm all caught up on What If. Hey, John Westhoff. And what the hell? Riverdale. Oh my God, Riverdale. Oh my God. I don't know what's going on in that show. It's like you wish they had a shark to jump over. They jumped over something, but it wasn't aquatic life. I can tell you that. It was something else. Woo.
That's
baby.
Yeah. I have not watched any of Riverdale in like 2 years at this point.
Yeah.
And I know that like with the time jump and Archie being in prison at some point and all this other craziness, and it just
and it's like,
who knows, it's so soapy.
So they had a scene where he's having PTSD, and this isn't a spoiler because it was in every write-up about the episode. It's all out there. And so they have him flash back to the war, and he's wearing a doughboy helmet from World War I with artillery that's clearly Vietnam era. Now, that kind of shit worked in Gotham, where you didn't exactly know what the time period was. It sort of was the 80s, but it sort of was present day, and that worked. And I think kind of Pennyworth definitely follows up on that stuff where, it's set in the 60s, but it's not a 60s that ever happened. I think because with this season, with the changes being so abrupt and the 7-year time jump, and oh boy, baby.
As John says here, why watch what you're not digging? Cut back.
Oh, right, no, because I don't want to go there, John Westoff, because every time we get into this conversation, you have me convinced I am insane. He has me convinced that there is mental illness happening, and I certainly know that I enjoy it enough to continue.
That sometimes is all you need, especially with some CW shows. But as long as you enjoy it,
because when he starts talking to me, it's like, oh my God, I am crazy. I'm crazy, man.
Being detail oriented, and finding details that you don't like doesn't mean you don't like the overall product.
Yeah.
So,
but also there are some things where you have to see something to the end.
Yeah. And completionists. I mean,
yeah. Like there have been shows where the last few seasons were rough, and you just kept going because you want to see things to the end. I forgot what show it was very recently where it was like I don't even know if I'm enjoying it.
Well, that makes sense because John, you complete me. So I'm a completionist and you complete me. So
yeah.
For anybody who's listening, John just posted, I enjoy Caleb enough to continue to be his friend.
Here's to you, brother.
Anthony Camito actually also agrees here. Riverdale is full of anachronisms. Nobody knows where, who, what, where, why.
Like the only cities they reference are New York and Montreal on the show. Those are the only other city, unless there's like what is where Sabrina is, the Glendale or Glendale? Greendale. Something. Yeah. So
the sunk cost fallacy, David. Yes, so you've put in so much time and attention, you just have to see it to the end.
Yeah,
so much emotional investment.
Yeah, so not many geek gets this week. The only one I got, actually, I did get some books, which ties into the book that I'm going to talk about. But I did get, the Imagine Next figures that are from Fisher Price on the DC. These were at clearance, so they were like $1. So, I took a chance on one, and I really wanted Wildcats right there. And I ended up getting, I'm not really horribly did. I got Bronze Tiger.
Yeah.
So that's relatively cool, but I wanted Wildcat. And this is, every once in a while you see like they have a figure like you never thought you would see. Do you guys even recognize the guy in the front there? I know you can see Batman and, Killer Moth and Talon. But can you recognize who this dude is?
Is that supposed to be Blue Beetle?
No, it's a character named Yellow Wasp, which is now obviously they've retrofitted it for the current day, but this is a Golden Age villain for Wildcat. And man, I was like, and it's also because it's a kid's toy, they don't use killer, so it's like K-Moth and K-Wasp. So that's the only geek get I got this week.
Cut.
Yeah.
Is that what Kmart stands for? I have concern.
Killer Mart.
Killer Mart.
Is that Killer Mart? I didn't know.
Man, that's like
Blue light special on the killing floor.
That's like a VHS lost that title there.
Right.
That was Chopping Mall 2.
Mhm.
Killer Mart.
Mhm.
The Youngblood with the deep cut.
Yeah. So unless you guys have any other show and tell, we can. It looks like you did. You just made a point there.
Yeah, no, I do. I've been trying to do this. I've started making special trips just for this when I can. So, and I shit you not, Bill. Now that you were talking about concerts earlier, I had a garbage vinyl in my hands, getting ready to buy it, and I opted for another vinyl because I'm only letting myself buy 2 at a time because money. But so I picked up a few today on the way home. Swung by. There's a Barnes and Noble. I know, support your local record shop, and I would, but there's a Barnes and Noble on the way to the house. So,
hey, brother, in some areas, Barnes and Noble is your local bookstore.
Right.
Really.
Well, literally the only record store available to me is one across town, and it's like 30 minutes away from my house. So, but I picked up Guns N' Roses' "Use Your Illusion" Volume 1 on vinyl. For those of you who've been kind of keeping up, we bought a record player not too long ago, so I am righting wrongs and adding to my collection. And I bought this beauty. So Soundgarden. This is the Bad Motorfinger 25th anniversary vinyl. So very excited. Still in the wrapper. Hadn't opened it up, but I'm going to very soon.
That was the first tour of theirs I saw.
Never got to see them. Not all together. There's
a Soundgarden cover band playing tomorrow night at a local park over here. And there's part of me would love to go, but it's also probably going to be like 93 degrees by the time the band comes on. So I'm like, but I gotta say, like, if you're going to be a tribute band, that's brave.
You can pull off. Well, if you can hit those notes, as far as a vocalist goes, you're doing work. I picked up previews today too. I'm going to count that as a nerd get because this is like a toy to me. I love playing.
I love previews.
Yeah, and then last but not least, I didn't pick this up today, but each episode, for those of you who are listening and not watching, I try to put a little trinket behind me because I don't have much nerd stuff on my wall. But I've got the Rainbow Batman pop hanging out with me behind my back today. And like I said, I didn't pick this up, but just pulling it out of my collection and setting a little geek thing behind me on my fish tank in my office.
It is cool. John had mentioned a little bit earlier, Bill's beard has that Wolverine healing factor. That is correct. If you were here a couple weeks ago, Bill had an accident.
No quotations. It was an accident. It was me trimming, and I went, "Oh fuck, yeah."
Went a little too close.
And I could not do it, and I could not do like some kind of thing where you had like a space. It just wasn't working. It had to go.
But it is back. It is coming back.
Yeah,
it is,
it's there.
It's got some.
It's all white, but it's coming back.
Some pretty awesome coverage. Yes, jealous. But I don't have any nerd gets. I don't really go out and shop much. I did get more bags and boards yesterday, so I guess that kind of counts. Like I'm definitely a homebody during the week and just have been very, very busy since Jason's been back from Colorado. So as has he's been busy too, doing some pretty awesome stuff with the new garage studio. All that like home repair, home person stuff that I can't do. So.
Can't or won't?
He's.
You might be more can't. You might be more can't.
I'm more can't.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I'll give everybody that. There's some won't like. There's some like. I'd rather not. But then there's also the. I am going to mess this up massively.
Yeah, and let's face it. There's usually one person in the relationship that's better wired for certain things than others.
Yeah. Literally, he's going to be doing some wiring at some point, and I can't. So. Yeah.
All these shelves are Rob. These are all homemade shelves. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm overloading, so you see like I had a stack on the floor, and I just to get stuff out, but boy, I have to get this in order. Oh my God, it's so
It
out of
needs
order.
to be in alphabetical. I'm just
It
unsure.
was, and over time,
the
things
alphabet grew.
happen. Yeah,
The alphabet
got new
changed.
letters.
A, B, G, H, Q, R, 3.
All of a sudden, an umlaut showed up, and Bill didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bauhaus? Aura.
Well, the Bauhaus, that's relatively close to the Pretenders, so
it's all in genres and subgenres, so that's good.
So, well, it's cool. We have people watching. There's a lot of stuff going on tonight, including the movie bears are on tonight.
Yeah, they are.
Instead of their Tuesday nights. Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah.
Yeah. We still love them, though.
It might be downgraded to extreme like tonight, but we do love them.
Very, very high like.
Okay.
John Runyon here mentions frantically filing my comics into my collector's database program as I'm listening in. Gotta unbury my desk. I feel you, John. I feel you.
Yeah.
David also mentions the difference between Z and Z.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, you know.
The first time I was really aware of that in the 80s, there was a band called what I thought was Vitamin Z. And since it's British, it's actually Vitamin Z. And that was the first time I was really like I've heard the concept before of the pronunciation, but that was the first time I faced it in real life, I guess.
You survived.
I did.
You lived to tell the tale.
And Vitamin Z didn't.
Yeah. Vitamins and minerals.
But if you ever hear it, it's actually really the one chart single in the States is really catchy. It's called "Burning Flame." It's really catchy. Yeah, in that 80s, like Lindrum sort of way.
I think that and then we'll move on. But like the ZZ thing is kind of interesting because it creates some very interesting rhyming schemes in songs, poems, and alphabet song, I should say, because it just doesn't ring very well when you pronounce it as Z for the ABCs. But yeah, it's all good.
Well, if we're going to talk about music, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the elephant in the room and mention the passing of Charlie Watts, the iconic, amazing, and I mean literally I think the backbone of the group. Of the Rolling Stones, for more decades than most people can count.
Yeah.
And he passed away this week, which I spent a lot of time. 2 weeks ago, bought a Rolling Stones album and spent a lot of time spinning the Stones this week. So rest in peace, Charlie. Thanks for all the tunes.
Yeah.
I mean, hasn't he been married? Like they just did a just a photo collage for him, obviously the past couple of days, but something I didn't realize that he had been married to his wife for over 40 years or something, I think. Which I mean, for being part of a group that he was part of and having that kind of lifestyle or sharing in that kind of lifestyle, obviously not as ostentatious of some of his bandmates, but it's kind of tough to do for a lot of people, living that kind of star life and life of celebrity. So that's
especially in a band with 3 or 4 or 5, depending upon the time period, who you're talking about, that really embraced that. And
the rock and roll culture.
It's interesting, they had another quiet one in the band. It was, 10 times louder than Charlie. And, they were the first arena act I saw. My first arena show was in 1981, was the Stones with Tina Turner opening. And, time's marching on. But, it's a backbeat that I've heard literally my entire life. And he was tremendously important to that band. So I don't know what's ahead for them. I mean, if they wanted to fold it up after the dates that they've committed to, I don't think anybody would begrudge them. at this point.
No. Especially, I mean, number one, the grief alone from doing that. So Duff McKagan, who is one of my favorite bassists in rock and roll, bassist for Guns N' Roses, and for Velvet Revolver for a long time. He put up a really beautiful kind of epitaph on his personal Facebook or Instagram social media page, talking about just the importance of the rhythm section and what Charlie meant for the genre of rock and roll, showing just generations upon generations of the importance and necessity of a solid rhythm section, and how he was just subtly almost the steel spine of an entire genre of music, and didn't necessarily get a lot of accolades for that. I mean, but should have. He really set the bar and just laid the foundation for that. Well, and in addition to a ton of blues drummers that he kind of, he learned from and everything. But as far as just the genre of rock and roll goes, more almost the grandfather of it, just more instrumental to it than I think most people realize, especially people my age and younger, who don't, we look at the bands like the Stones and the Beatles, we look at them in hindsight. We don't really get to understand just how novel and revolutionary they were. We get to see, the product and juxtapose it to what we hear now, and we're like, well, okay, this other stuff is faster and it's louder and it's yada yada, but they pulled that from the ether. And I think that's, people my age, I really hope, and younger, I really hope they realize that.
All right. We are 26 minutes and 51 seconds in, and we really haven't talked comic books. So why don't we get started with that? So I'm going to move it over to Steve. Steve, tell us about a book that you're reading that you're digging.
So it's a book that I've been reading since about 2015, and it just last week published the final issue, and that is Ascender number 18, also technically Descender number 50. So Ascender, started out, obviously, this is a sequel series to the original Descender series by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen, and I have loved it since the moment that I picked up the first issue of Descender. Obviously these are two bookend series. The first one concerned sort of like a post AI dominant society, galactic society, where robots are rare. They're, endangered essentially because of a massive disaster that happened when giant robots basically descended and started destroying a lot of civilization. And it led into Ascender, which, concerns a society, the same society, just Ascender. Yes, whatever. Where technology has been completely overrun by magic, and magic now rules this galactic cluster in a cruel, tyrannical way. And it's just a very interesting shift. But the heart of this series is really the personal stories, the personal struggles of the core group of characters. In fact, a single family, essentially. Tim 21 is the protagonist of the first Descender series, where he was originally starting his life as the companion to a young boy who then unfortunately has to abandon him when his family escapes the destruction of the giant Descenders. But he goes on a mission to go and find him, to rekindle his relationship with this boy who is now a grown man. Through Descender and Descender, you get to see this family unit evolve, and Tim brings people to him to sort of create this new unit. In the future, which takes place 10 years later in Ascender, it follows Mila, who has a very similar pull and draw that Tim 21 has. She's now the daughter of Tim's young boyhood companion and his wife, who unfortunately has been transformed by mother, the evil sort of witch that kind of rules this galactic cluster with her magic, and she's been transformed into a vampire, and she's half human, half cyborg vampire. And Mila, of course, and her father kind of live in a sheltered, hiding existence, just trying to stay alive and away from Mother's minions. And through this, she rediscovers the family that Tim 21 built. She finds Captain Tulsa. She, brings together, the robot companions, including Driller, and her father. And of course, at some point, eventually also, the mother is rescued and turned back from her vampiric nature that she had been turned into. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful story. And there's some action. There's a lot of, the great twisty, crazy escapes and some space battles and everything like that. But really, it always comes back to a very personal, very quiet, central story of this family trying to find themselves again. And eventually Tim 21 comes back into the picture. Turns out that he's been part of this AI sort of consciousness outside of known space, and comes back bringing the power of the Descenders with him and that AI presence as a way to counterbalance the magic that's taken over that galactic cluster. But really, it's between Tim 21 and Mila that bring together the only way to find some kind of true balance. And surprisingly, it's actually Mila's mother that acts as the catalyst here, which is, if you've been sticking with the series since Descender, since the original #1, going all the way through, it's such an amazing evolution of not just the central figures, not just the figures that you've been following, but also some of these side characters that weave in and out of the main story. And I think that Lemire has just found a way to really pack this series in with very emotionally resonant themes in what could have been just sort of a standard, kind of crazy, robots are destroying everything. We got to save ourselves from the robots. Or, oh no, the robots are gone. Now it's magic and vampires and the goblins and witches. Lots of craziness, really, fun, high concept stuff. But it all comes back to sort of this, the alienation of, and he actually did describe this very, very eloquently in an interview very early on when Descender was released, that his story is really about sort of the idea of fatherhood, but also the alienation of the self, being othered, being separated from that which means so much or could mean a lot to one, to a person, pretty much family and the kind of interpersonal connection that we create with others around us. And I mean, I'm really sad that Ascender is done, that the whole story is now complete. Obviously, there's some open-endedness at the end of this issue. That there's some hope that potentially we could kind of go back and revisit this sort of world that Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen have created. But as a bookend issue, it really does tie everything up pretty neatly. And as sad that I am to see it end, I'm actually very satisfied with the story that got us here. And I'm really, really kind of excited to be able to share a complete story with other people who haven't had a chance to check this out yet. So obviously, starting with Descender, continuing with Descender, all 50 issues and 10, I think it's 10 volumes now that are out there. So really excited. And of course, there is also, like with a lot of properties now, a promise of a potential television series or movie, because both have been optioned recently. The TV series, I think, optioned last year. And the movie's been optioned from Sony since actually before I think the first issue of Descender was published. But if this doesn't make it to the big or small screen, it's not a problem. This is just a really beautiful book with a great story and just very emotionally impactful characters in writing. So Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen's Ascender, number 18.
I think it's time for me to read that first volume of Descender that I've had since it was first published.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
The first volume is all I've read of that, and I don't know why, because I'm on the record and I'll own it. I think Jeff Lemire is one of the more important voices in comics today, and the literariness that he brings to his work. I got grief on the other podcast not too long ago for saying he's what Neil Gaiman was to the generation before mine. I think Jeff Lemire is bringing something up. I think I really do think he's that important.
Kind of. I may have sided with your co-hosts on that,
and that's fair. I mean, but I think
I'm not taking away anything, because I think he's a very important voice, and it's very important that he's a non-United States voice that operates in this medium.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. All right.
No, I mean, I do. I think
that equation, but I do think he's a very important creator.
I think he's
was right out of the gate.
I think he's definitely changed. Yeah. He's already changed the medium, and he's a very young writer, as in the terms of the way things go.
And I love watercolor. Talking about prolific,
Oh my God!
This came out. Descender started 6 years ago, so it started in March of 2015, and since then we've had the Black Hammer universe. We've had all of the work that he's done for the Big Two. I mean, just all these.
Do you know, because these are on the side here, Black Hammer almost fills a short box at this point?
Yes, I do know that.
It's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, when you consider his work with Underwater Welder, to his just mainstream superhero stuff, to to now his television stuff, And that's not just to tie it back to Ascender and Descender. Nguyen's watercolors. I mean, I love watercolor, and his stuff is just jaw dropping. So I've got to get on it and read it. I hope they come out with a hardcover, because it's 50 issues. That's almost perfect for an omnibus or a compendium. I'm hoping they give us that in a nice little shelf porn package.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I know it's kind of tough to see, kind of hard to see here, but just the dynamism and smoothness of these watercolor panels and pages are just, I mean, he plays with color and with, the bleed that watercolor allows you to do with line art. So it's fantastic. Just the, and also of course the coded nature of color throughout the series. Blue, white, red are extremely important in kind of denoting what's, what kind of energy something is putting out. So it's just, I mean, gorgeous. And the covers are great. I mean, all the covers have been absolutely gorgeous. So, okay, all right. I've gushed enough.
Okay, next. Over to Caleb. Caleb, tell us about something you're reading that you're enjoying.
So I kind of set up my own segue on this one, and I'm going to take advantage of it. When we talk about important voices, the voice is no longer with us, but there's been very few voices that I think are as important as John Lewis's, Congressman John Lewis. And this past week, I had the privilege of reading the new graphic memoir Run that was published, obviously posthumously. But John Lewis had his hand in it. All but the last little bit of it had been written and approved. He had been shown the artwork for it. So I think 95% of this had John Lewis's stamp of approval on it before he passed away. Of course, it's got Andrew Aiden, who helped him with it. The great Nate Powell also pitched in some wonderful artwork with El Fury to round off that creative team. This book picks up where March left off. I adore March. I'm looking at it on my shelf right now. So where March ended was really the passage of the Civil Rights Act. This book kind of picks up from that, and it goes to the aftermath is probably the wrong word, but I think in some senses it did leave an aftermath. The battle over people being, had the right to vote, but not the opportunity and not the ability to get through picket lines, and the the naysayers, both in the South, which I think, when people think about the Civil Rights Act and they think about, Selma, and they think about the South. But this book gets into some of what was happening in the northern states, what happened in California with some of the riots around that time, and a town that burned for for a week in the midst of all this. The emergence of the Ku Klux Klan, which had already been active and was very big and had a huge membership, but it was almost like they kicked a beehive, and they, through this book, John Lewis is able to give his perspective and speak a little bit about how the KKK adopted and bastardized, I'll use that word, the tactics of groups that he started, the SNCC, the rest of the Black Lives student advocate groups, the NAACP, they took to the streets, they marched, they did that whole thing, what about white rights? And, even though white rights weren't being infringed, and he walks us through that, and encyclopedically, when this was written, his mind was just as sharp as the tack. So he gives you a great insight to this history, and you really can hear his voice coming through. Something that I thought was incredibly interesting too, and I honestly didn't expect it, although I should have, I guess. They really get into, at the same time where we have these civil rights struggles happening, and the civil rights movement gaining ground and also having ground taken from them here, was the same time that Vietnam really hit its full force, and the draft. And you had an inordinate amount of Black men being drafted and going to fight for democracy and fighting for these Western liberal ideas that to instill them in another country. And I'm going to use air quotes for the people who can't listen, because I still maintain that Vietnam was just a proxy war between us and Russia, to show them, we were showing Russia that we didn't mind leaving bodies on the field. I think it was a political maneuver as much as it was to put democracy and to establish a strategic stronghold in that region. But they get into some of those notes on how not only was it controversial for Black men who didn't have these rights or were denied these rights here in the States to be drafted and fought somewhere else, it also split the groups. And that's something that I didn't know. And I mean, that comes from my own ignorance of the history and things I should know. But, groups like the SNCC, they split. They had these vast disagreements on what stances they should take and what official positions they should have on the Vietnam War, and whether or not people should burn their draft cards or sign up as conscientious objectors. And that was very interesting. And it is, I think it's important to hear John Lewis, a man who was in Congress, talk about his thoughts on war. He was in the governing body when so many wars were fought, be it in the 80s with Desert Storm, and obviously as we're in right now and we're pulling out of Afghanistan. He's part of the governing body when we passed the authorization, the military use authorization to go into Afghanistan, and inevitably we followed him into Iraq, and we know his thoughts on it. But it was a very complex and complicated man as he weighed and wavered in his love for democracy and his spirit of freedom and the expansiveness of freedom that he wanted to see not only here but in the world. We see him talk about that a little bit, and the challenges of making those really hard decisions. They get into some of the history of the first Black congressman in Georgia once pre-clearance happened, and the voting lines were restructured so that Fulton County, in the heart of Atlanta, got their own congressional district, and the first Black man who was voted to be a congressman for that district, and how he was voted in, but he was expelled for making statements on the Vietnam War. And so they went back and they had a second vote, a special election, and he was voted back in, and his cohorts continued to not seat him. And they had a third election. And he talks about that, and this idea that, even though we've gained the ground, even though we've won the proverbial battle and we have the quote unquote rights to do this, they are still using these constructs of white supremacy to keep out our voices and to stifle our fundamental and basic rights. If you haven't read March, I encourage you to. I think this is this is a book that piggybacks right off that, and I hope people grab this and put it on the shelf. In a lot of ways, this is one of the most the closest I've ever been able to feel to John Lewis. I've watched him give his speeches. I've been in an audience watching him, live. I've read his biographies, in the works that he did. But this right here has made me feel closer to his viewpoints, his ideologies, and the lessons that he left for us, especially young people like me. I mean, I know, young law student, so constitutional and stuff is very dear to my heart and very much on my mind. But if you haven't gotten this, I think it's an important book. And right now, as we are dealing with some of the same type of Jim Crow strategies across the United States to ensure that voters don't get to vote, to knock people off of the rolls like they did in the 60s, as I've said many times, I think in some areas the spirit of Bull Connor is still very much alive and well, and that's unfortunate. We haven't gotten past that. This talks about that, and it's one of those situations we have to see what worked in order to prevent the repetition of history, and having our ever-changing, ever-evolving, and rightful understanding of freedoms stripped back and devolved from us. And so I think this is a great way to start that. So pick this up, read it, digest it, have the young people in your lives read it and digest it, spread it, talk to your local librarian, make sure it's on the shelves and available to your kids in the community, because this is a strong comic. And it's not only important to comic lovers and lovers of sequential art, it's important to us as a people and as a culture. Not to mention that you just get gorgeous Nate Powell art. I mean, Nate Powell does gray wash wonderfully. He is the way that he lays out the pages, the way that he gives you perspective, and the storytelling that he does. Him and Fury both. It's a masterclass in this kind of novelistic visual storytelling, and especially when it comes to something that's telling history and showing you, trying to lace emotion and empathy in with storytelling that is able to be grasped by us all, for any age group. I think Nate Powell, I've got a shelf full of his books. He is incredible. I don't know if he's ever going to do another one of these kind of graphic memoirs with another person. I hope so, because he's excellent at it. So who knows what he's going to do next. But that's my first book, or grab this and run with it.
Right, run with cool. Run.
Run with Ron.
Run with Ron.
Run.
Okay, I'm going to shift gears, but there is a sensible sort of transition in the first book I'm going to talk about. We clearly don't have time to each have 3 segments because of us talking. But I did want to bring up that I have been trying to get caught up on DC Comics from the last box. I made very good inroads. There were 2 books in particular I wanted to talk about. Continuing on with some of the subject matter that is both explicit and implicit with Run. I did want to mention the final issue of The Other History of the DC Universe. And with this particular issue, as you can see on the cover, it's centered around Anissa Pierce and her superhero identity of Lightning. She is also Black Lightning's daughter, and Black Lightning was the first hero that was spotlighted in this series, which focuses on the the ethnic minority characters within the DC universe. And just like in those previous issues, it's John Ridley who writes this, with art by, I can never get this guy's name right, Giuseppe Camuncoli. I tried. And again, it has the old school, in a sense, format of the original history of the DC universe, but again, told through very different lenses. Really interesting takes on characters and concepts in this book. Her first, talking about Lightning, her first major exposure was as part of the Outsiders team that Judd Winnick wrote in I don't want to say just before New 52, but in the early I don't even want to say early probably mid 2000s. I'd probably peg it like 2005. I haven't checked the copyright dates on that. And the way that material is covered, yeah, those were like okay books, but it's almost treated like gold in the mythology and the topics that are covered. Hearing Anissa's take on Batman, who the Outsiders, was responsible for the creation, with the version that she was part of, which was led by Dick Grayson. You also have Roy Harper, who was part of the mix. With Roy Harper, there's always tons of drama. But hearing her take about her father's homophobia, that was an interesting aspect that comes into here. And you also have to think, somebody that was brought up from a fundamentalist Christian background as Jefferson Pierce would, some of those behaviors may have followed him for a time. Really, really well written book. I don't know how much gasoline was left in the tank. I don't know how many other stories could have been told, concerning these particular characters, but a really great way to go out on. If you haven't been getting it, there's going to be a collected edition, and the collected edition is going to be in the larger format, and not the comic book format. So, and also just worth mentioning, Black Label, it's continuity, but it isn't. So you have that there. Another book I wanted to talk about, because this is a book that made me cry twice. And for years we've had Batman Black and White. And those were these, short stories, initially a miniseries. Then they had backups in Gotham Knights, I think, and then other subsequent Batman Black and White series. They eventually extended that to both Superman and Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman with the black and gold, and Superman with the red and blue. I hope they do extend this to the Flash and Green Lantern, because these 8-page vignette stories, not tied to continuity but tied to your heartstrings in many cases, are so good. One thing I love about it is they take artists and writers that have never touched Superman before. This is a variant cover. This is Art Adams.
Yeah.
First of all, you don't see Art Adams art that often anymore. So for him to, he's not retired. He just, makes a good enough living doing commissions. So if there's an Art Adams incentive cover and it's not going to bust the bank, I'll usually get it. Some of the creators in this particular issue, Judge Winnick, who I have not seen write comics in a while. I mean, he may be in independent world, but I have not seen his name associated with much since I want to say Catwoman with the New 52 at the beginning. That's the last series I really remember. I'm sure there's others that he's done, but that was the main one I can remember. And this is his take on Superboy coming into the Crypto coming into his world, and Crypto's a good boy. He's such a good boy. Really touching story. You have G. Willow Wilson doing a story about Clark Kent, which is the closest to the Christopher Reeve Clark Kent that you'll ever see outside of the films. Wonderful story written by Joshua Williamson with art by Chris Sprouse about Jimmy Olsen and Superman's friendship. And after that, we have Mark Buckingham on story and art, with a eulogy for Krypton called Red Sun, and the decision the very hard decision that Jor-El made to send his son off. And Chris Sprouse is so good at doing heroes looking heroic, and look at his Superman there. I mean, it's just wonderful. I hope this page goes for thousands, because it deserves to. And then last and certainly not least is Daniel Warren Johnson, doing this exquisite tribute to his father through the eyes of Jonathan Kent. If that story doesn't get to you and you already know the characters, if you already know the characters' mythology, you don't have a heart. You just don't. like I said, this book made me cry twice. Like literally made me cry twice. So we have one issue left, but they've all been good. So
that and Wonder Woman Black and Gold are some of my favorite books on the shelf right now. Just absolutely jaw dropping. And to answer your question about Judd Winnick, he has been doing his own series of all ages book. I'm not sure if they're published by Scholastic or who, but it's called Hilo.
Okay, yeah. So, what was the other one he had about the smartest boy or Jimmy? There's another like all ages series he did.
Yeah, I'm not sure, so don't get me lying to you on that. But he's up to I think 6 or 7 volumes of Hilo now.
All right.
So he's been putting in work. I mean, like and when you do an all ages book and you get Dave Pilkey writing the blurb for you, then you're doing good work.
But yeah, I'm glad you're enjoying the Superman and Wonder Woman books. I certainly am as well.
Adore it.
And like I said, like I'd love to see this treatment for the Flash and Green Lantern as well. Yeah. I don't know what the hell you call a Green Lantern book, maybe Green and Green, but just really wonderful vignette stories that I imagine since these are prestige books, I imagine the hardcovers would be shelf borne and would be beautiful and hardcover format.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yep. All right, Steve, over to you. Tell us about something else you're reading that you're digging.
Well, let's just say that without Brian here, I always feel kind of nervous talking about X-Men books because I love getting his opinions. And I know that when he reads them, it's always always great feedback and reviews that we get on that. But on that note, because it's big and it just came out and we have to talk about it, or I think we should talk about it, Trial of Magneto, #1 of 4. So, I mean, people who had been following along and read the entirety of the Hellfire Gala, it ended yes with Mars being terraformed and turned into like New Araco basically, but it also ended with Scarlet Witch with Wanda coming and reuniting essentially with Magneto and embracing each other. I think that was in trying to remember which book that was, whether it was X-Force or maybe X-Factor. But he basically he hugs her in one panel and says, "Hey, I'm starting to skip. Let's wait until it catches up." Oop, there we go. Am I caught up yet?
I think so. Volume-wise, you sound fine.
Okay, there we go. Yeah. Just wanted to make sure we were caught up. But he and Wanda embrace, and he forgives her, and he says everything's going to be okay. And then just a few pages later, she's found dead, and of course found dead from her son Tommy, which was kind of terrible. But anyway, in this issue, it essentially kicks off the mystery. So we have X-Factor doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're a forensic team, essentially, that finds out what happened for a mutant to die, who killed a mutant, what happened to that mutant, prior to getting them bumped up on the list to be brought back for resurrection protocols. In this case, though, Wanda is still considered the Great Pretender. She, since they changed canon for her around the time that they were premiering Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver in the MCU film universe, she and Pietro became non-mutants. I don't know why or what other motivation other than the fact that, well, we needed to do something with the franchise, and that's a way that we can continue to use them. I mean, obviously there was some. I know that they already had the agreement that they could do that. Yeah. However, in order to completely separate it out story-wise from the people who know enough about Magneto, Quicksilver, and Scarlet Witch. You need to find a way to completely make sure that mutant doesn't enter into the picture at all, if you're going to be having them in the films. And so, of course, kind of around the same time that Inhumans became really popular and important to Marvel Comics, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were no longer mutants. And so, along with a lot of other things that Scarlet Witch is famous for doing in Marvel continuity, she is not very popular with most of the remaining mutants that now live on Krakoa. She's still being referred to as the Great Pretender. In this issue, there are scenes where there are giant parties happening, and bonfires, people celebrating the fact that she's dead. So there's obviously there's a lot of history with Wanda, and the No More Mutants issue, No More Mutants thing, that still resonates with mutants today. And so, of course, they're not really sure if they should bring her back, because turns out they can bring her back, because she and Quicksilver were fooling Cerebro for such a long time. Their consciousnesses have been completely backed up to a point when, of course, it was revealed a couple of years back that they were not mutants. So then Cerebro stopped backing up their consciousness, unlike with everyone else. So there is a possibility for them to bring her back. They can resurrect her. And in fact, this is where we learned that they could technically resurrect anybody. They don't actually have to be mutants. They can bring people back to life. And there's a vote on whether they should do that for Wanda. Now, in other cases where mutants have been murdered in previous, in X Factor, when they're brought back, there is the possibility that they would have memories of what happened right before their murder, which can help sort of solve an issue or solve a mystery. In this case, it would be a huge gap in comic book time, whenever, for one to be brought back. Of course, a lot of signs, a lot of clues point to Magneto. She was bound by something that seems to be supernaturally controlled metal. And she was strangled by something, not an actual arm, but something possibly supernaturally controlled metal that crushed her windpipe. Very, very tragic stuff. And Boy gets to work out his deductive powers there, and his ability to see things like magic residue and X-ray spectrum. But Magneto does not want to willingly submit to questioning, and of course there ends up being a huge battle. Quicksilver also makes appearance here to try and subdue Magneto. So there's a lot going on in this issue. I think it's a great setup. I think there's a lot of things said that can't be unsaid. There's a lot of actions and choices being made by the main X teams that are involved in this, as well as from the council members, as to what they need to do about both Wanda, but then also now that Magneto is being revealed as the potential perpetrator. And of course, that's going to be the subject of this miniseries. How the trial is going to affect other people as much as it affects him and his place here in Krakoa. There's also a little bit towards the end, I'm not going to spoil too much about it, that kind of makes you question exactly, potentially, what kind of future Scarlet Witch may have. So, very interesting setup, very kind of cool. I think that it's Leah Williams, Lucas Wernick here, and Edgar Delgado on colors. I think they do an amazing job with with the dialogue. They sound like themselves. There's some great little moments here, like at the bar where the original Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, or Brotherhood of Mutants, sort of have a drink in memory of Wanda, getting to see all of them sort of sitting at the bar and feeling their feelings. Some really great moments here, and I think it's gorgeous. But I'm really intrigued as to what could potentially come next of this. And we do know that this is going to be spinning into Inferno. That's going to be the big game changer for everything. But then again, every crossover is a huge game changer. This changes everything, no matter what it is.
Nothing will be the same.
Nothing will be the same. But we'll see what happens here, because this, could be throwing a massive monkey wrench into what kind of plans that people have had here on Krakoa for the foreseeable future. So
yeah,
kind of interesting.
I'm kind of like Bill on this one. This book made me cry twice. So first with Tommy and his reaction, and just being brokenhearted and talking about having to tell his brother, and then with we're spoiling things, but with Quicksilver's reaction to it, so for those of you who don't know, like, this book was hard for me to read. I'm a Wanda super fan. I mean, I'm looking in my office right now. I'm like, I've got 6 pieces of Scarlet Witch art hanging in my office. That's my girl. Like, ever since I first saw her in George Perez's Avengers, which the first thing I noticed was her hair, so I should have known I was gay then. But just fabulous hair, as George Perez is wont to do. But I am really, I cannot wait to get to the end of this, because I want to know what the machinations are. I want to know what they're doing, if this is resetting her stance as a mutant or what. But it strikes me that we have now had, this is now the second that I know of, and I'm not reading the full line. This is the second major issue with them not bringing somebody back. Of course, the other one being Destiny, Mystique's wife, that they refuse to bring back. Of course, they can't bring her back, because if they bring her back, she's going to blow up the Moira McTaggart shit, and the world's going to end. Yeah, or so they think. So we now have another person on the council that has a major issue with this. And to be fair, Magneto is pushing to resurrect her. Like, Magneto wants to bring her back. But I can see, like at some point, and we know now that Duggan is taking over, at some point what comes up must come down, right? Like, there has to be a kind of end game to this whole process. So and they've given us that in the sense of Destiny. So I'm wondering if this is going to play, if this is Hickman planting his seeds like he's done in all of his stories, be it from the Fantastic Four or East of West, where a shoe shows up in the second issue, and that shoe is gonna be the Messiah in the last issue or whatever, because he's Hickman and his brain works that way. So
messianic footwear, it is the future.
So I'm very, very interested to see how these family machinations play out. And again, like, there's a scene in there where just Mystique is being petty as hell, and understandably, and I'm like, okay, I like, you got to pick up on this, because there's a reason she's being that. And it's not just her history with Magneto. It's because her wife is still sitting in purgatory, and she is pissed. So I cannot, any chance I get to see my girl drawn is a good time. So I want to see her come back and take more of an active role somewhere, so I can see her more often.
Yeah, and the interesting thing with Scarlet Witch too, because there's the issue of magic involved, especially chaos magic. We've seen how magic can interfere with death when it comes to the X characters in the past couple of years. Thinking about Captain Britain, what happened to her during the Cross of Swords event, and how they brought her back. Not necessarily the way that would normally happen with people being resurrected on Krakoa. Also, even Rogue was essentially dead for a little bit, as she was sort of put in a magical cocoon or a magical coma of some sort before coming back to life with Apocalypse. So a lot of shit happened with Excalibur in the past 20 some issues. So, but yeah, I mean, there's some potential for craziness here anyway, because it is Wanda, and Wanda's chaos magic incarnate. So it just kind of goes to reason that something else might be happening here. So.
All right, cool. Just speaking of Excalibur, did you guys see the images of that upcoming box set of Captain Britain, Megan, and Kitty Pryde?
That looks so cool.
And the little teeny tiny Lockheed with them there too.
It's so cool.
Oh, it looks so good.
I want those toys. I have no place to put them, but I want some toys.
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk about one book in particular, but I just wanted to give some background on this. If you have seen my posts, and I do this online auction every Tuesday night, and sometimes I win trivia books, and sometimes I don't, but more often than not, I win trivia books, and get a couple of auction books. The store that actually sponsors that is a store in the next town over to me, Cranberry, New Jersey, known as Dr. Wonder's Comics and Collectibles. And the owner of Dr. Wonder is Stephanie Alikis. Prior to coming out as trans, Stephanie was known as David. And if that's sort of a familiar name in regards to some real deep cut Bronze Age readers, David had written a number of stories for DC's horror and war books. He had a story in one of the issues of Time Warp that was illustrated by Steve Ditko. So it was a career as a comic writer prior to becoming a retailer and various other adventures. But Stephanie gave me a call and let me know, you need to get down here now because we just got a bunch of books in and they are right up your street. And boy, was she right. Unfortunately, and fortunately, let's say, to the wallet, it was a lot of stuff I already had, but it was very early graphic novels. And we talked about this, Steve, in the show that we had dedicated to our first graphic novels. And I was able to get some stuff I didn't have. So let me just quickly go through. I got the very first Wonder Woman collection from 1972 with, as you can maybe make out here, with an introduction by Gloria Steinem. There's a hardcover version. This is a soft cover. As a kid, I never had this. Don't know why. Very, very spoiled only child in suburban New Jersey. Don't know why I never had this, but I never had this. Now I do. And again, with Gloria Steinem's intervention, it was very, very important step in her transitioning from the super spy Emma Peel type of Diana Prince Wonder Woman back into the superhero version. So we have her to thank for that as well, apart from many other advances in our culture. In terms of prose books, I didn't even know this existed when the Superman film came out in 1978. Because of a lot of legal complications with Mario Puzo, they could not issue a novelization. So they had a tie-in novel that was issued at the same time, which isn't set in the same world because he's Superboy and Lex Luthor knows the new Clark Kent as a teenager, so it's not the film continuity. But the first book in the series was Superman, Last Son of Krypton. It was a paperback. I had no idea there was a book club version in hardcover. So I got this, which is really cool. And on top of that, there was a sequel to that called Miracle Monday. And they were both written by Elliot S. Maggin, who wrote tons of Silver Age Superman stories. Miracle Monday has had a substantial afterlife. A lot of people think this is one of the best Superman stories written ever. If you look for it online, the PDF is available for free because DC doesn't completely own the material in there on a technicality. The main character in Miracle Monday is Kristen Wells, who later became the first Superwoman in the DC Comics continuity, the pre-crisis. So really interesting story. I got the first DC compilation of science fiction stories, Mysteries in Space, which is edited by Batman producer Michael Uslan. And a bunch of stories, mostly from the late 50s and early 60s, with DC's science fiction titles represented, and sometimes science fiction characters such as Adam Strange and Tommy Tomorrow and some others. But the jewel that I got, and I got these for like a steal. I got these for like nothing. It was awesome. This is an annual from 1981 from England. Marvel presents the Captain America Collector's Edition. This predates really collector's editions in the States, and this collects the 3 issues that Jim Steranko co-plotted and drew of Captain America. Now, again, Steranko in the current day is a Trumper piece of shit, but prior to that, he was an incredibly influential and important artist, and also a very important figure in documenting the history of comic books through various magazines of books that he shepherded. So this has his 3-issue run. It was only 3 issues, but it was a seismic. Almost like disruption of the character, because prior to that, the only artist that really left an impression on the character was Jack Kirby. So it follows up on a lot of the Hydra issues that were I don't want to say Hydra issues, but the Hydra plot lines that dominated his run on Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. By this time, he had left the title and had joined Captain America. He gave Steranko an opportunity to draw the Hulk, and you wouldn't think that Captain America versus the Hulk would be anything more than a 3-second fight, but Cap stands his ground through that. So there's some Hulkism there if just for Caleb, and it also introduces in this storyline Rick Jones as a surrogate Bucky, and for these issues he actually suits up as Bucky. And let me just get like an image from that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so again, beautiful paper, hardback. Just wonderful that this even exists. And through the 3 issues, there's just some absolutely exquisite Steranko images. There's one in particular I've got to show, and you may have seen this before, of Cap just laying Hydra agents to waste. So this came out in 1981, and there actually are 3 other books in this series with other properties, Spider-Man, Hulk, and the X-Men, but nothing like the material that's collected here. So a very, very happy accident that this came into the shop, and from the shop came into my hands. And now I got it, and I got it forever, and I love it, and I love it. So the material from those 3 issues, the material from those 3 issues has been reprinted again and again and again. So it's available in Epic collections, and available in Essentials, and available in Masterworks. And I think there's also a Steranko Visionary set that it's part of. So the material's out there. You can find it. And of course, always grab it digitally if you want to, but definitely for those 3 issues you should sample them, because it was what happens in those 3 issues actually sets the tone for almost a year and a half's worth of storylines that generate from it, even though Steranko by that time had left the book. So
awesome.
So there.
What you gonna do with that Wonder Woman book?
Oh, me? I'm gonna love it and hug it and squeeze it forever, and you'll get it in the will.
I was gonna fight Steve over it, so
I wanted to.
But also like this kind of material comes through that shop a lot, so I'll be on the lookout for you.
Yeah, I love it, and speaking of, since you're showing that book and you were talking about Wonder Woman, Black and Gold earlier. So some of my favorite Wonder Woman art is that classic Golden Age Wonder Woman. In one of the recent, in one of the recent Black and Gold issues, Tilly Walden draws Wonder Woman in that style, and it is some of the most amazing modern art. Yeah, I just adore it, and I want more Tilly Walden doing Diana, because it takes you back there.
Yeah,
it's so good. But those are awesome.
The book that Steve showed is a very good snapshot of that time period, the Wonder Woman, the War Years. And there's also a Superman and Batman issue. The Batman is very distinctive, because it basically has like everything about Batman in World War II, because he didn't touch those tropes as nearly as much as the other 2 characters. But you can still find those for very inexpensive prices at outlets like Ollie's.
Yeah.
And so
actually, I think that's where I got this one.
I need to get that. I don't have that, and it's a shame.
Yeah, and certainly much less expensive than the Golden Age omnibuses, omnibuy that are out there. All right.
On the buy.
Okay, well, looking at the clock, it's time that we start wrapping. Yep, go ahead. Go. What? Yep. What?
Caleb, did you have another book? I think you only got one. You only got Run.
No. Did I talk over him?
No, you didn't talk. No, you didn't talk over me. You just started going, and I was just like, "No, he's doing good."
You went through.
Caleb, I'm so sorry.
Straight out of me.
I am so sorry. I'm a failure as a host. I've never done this on the show. So you have another book. You got to get another book, and even if it's quick.
I went long on Run, so it's fine. But no, I will talk about another book just real quick. I'm sticking with was going to follow Steve with the House of Ideas. There is a new book out called Kang, which is timely because we just saw the emergence of the character in the cinematic universe. One might think, not to spoil anything for people who haven't seen it, but you're going to see this character again, and it's really so I got really excited about this book because OG Avengers fan. Love Kang, love when Kang shows up, even though I can't stand timey-wimey stuff most of the time. Some of the best classic stories with this are here. There you go. Steve showing off his Doctor Who t-shirt. I enjoy Kang. I think Kang brings something interesting to the table because it's always a challenge. Because he technically should always know how to win, and yet the superheroes have to step up and be super and defeat him against all odds. So this book is actually incredibly cool because it shows you, it gives you a roundabout understanding of who Kang is. All the iterations of him, be it from the Egyptian idiosyncrasies that he had going on to space lord to young person that would eventually turn into Iron Lad, just everything. It gives you a full fleshed out idea. And it starts off with this really wonderful kind of analogy from Alexander the Great. The guy saying, Alexander the Great hears that there's all of these different, universes and the multiverse essentially, and it just depresses him. And, his court, whatever, his right-hand man's like, why do you look so sad? Why does this bring you, why does this make you upset? And he just says, why shouldn't it make me miserable to know that there are an infinite amount of worlds out there and I get to be a master of none? And that's who Kang is. Like, that's a pretty good indication of where he's at. It flips from there and it shows you, it goes all the way back to the beginning to Nathaniel Richards. And Nathaniel Richards living in the 31st century, being a wonderkin in a world where everybody's a wonderkin. He's still awesome. But he's not like everybody else. And you wouldn't imagine that he would be. He's a savant in many ways. He wants to find a way to uncover the treasures of old and learn from history. And so for 2 years, he has been tracking down a path that he is going to lead him to knowledge that no one else has. It's not available to anybody else. And, I'm not going to spoil the entire book because I think folks should go read this, but what he's tracking down is the Library of Doom. It's Victor Von Doom's library, and he finds it. And he goes back and he gets down there and there's all these old tomes and Doom's armor sitting, in the thinker pose in the middle of the room. And he's kind of taken aback by just the wonder and the appeal and the shine of everything. And then the eyes light up, and it's not just the armor of Doom, it's a Doombot. And the Doombot goes after him because he's an intruder. And he's, this is just a kid. He's just an explorer, very much like young Indiana Jones. It's got that kind of vibe to it. And so he's fighting off this Doombot when all of a sudden just a blast comes out of nowhere, an energy blast. And who is it? Of course, it's Kang coming back to save himself. And they go on this just adventure where he teaches, he basically says to the kid, by the end of this day, you're going to be me. And he's like, how can, that's like, we're way, you're a space, whatever. How can that possibly be? And he's like, just time doesn't matter to us. Time is immaterial. By the end of this day, you will be me. And really what that means is the artist who, and by the way, I should say this was written by Jackson Lanzik and Colin Kelly, two writers I'm not very familiar with. But it's drawn wonderfully by Carlos Magno, who I love what Carlos Magno puts on the page. Espen Grunjagen did the colors, and Joe Caramanga from BC did the letters. What this book is just really a chance for Carlos Magno to show the hell out, drawing everything from interactions with the Fantastic Four, drawing a fight with the Avengers, going to, I say the Savage Land, but it's just primal Earth, dinosaurs, T-Rexes, going into the jungle and meeting early individuals that would play a role later on in Kang's life, and really getting in touch with this killer be killed mentality that Kang becomes, and the need to master his entire domain. And when you're a Time Lord, or whatever Kang is, everything is your domain. But he's got some hard lessons to learn from his older self. It's incredibly cool. I can't get enough of looking at it. Look, I'll spoil this much. You get to see Kang slapping the shit out of himself. So for being a smart ass kid, it's beautiful. Carlos Magno is doing some wonderful work here. The depth, the detail, the breadth of the scope, the landscapes that he lays out are phenomenal. And look, like I said, if you're just an OG Marvel head, like if you just love like the universe, you get to see stuff like this where he's got the Fantastic Four and he's got the Avengers, and everybody's doing battle, and he ties it back to the old continuity stuff that we've seen. If you know the lore, if you've read the books, you'll remember what he's laying out in this book. And then I should say, I got the Stormbreakers variant cover by Patrick Gleason on this. I love Patrick Gleason. I think his art is wonderful. It's delightful. It just brings me joy. So grab this, and it's got OG Avengers there. So it's just really cool stuff. So yeah, go check out Kang. If maybe you watched Loki and you want to know what this is, and this is a good place to start. Maybe you want to catch up. This is going to be a good kind of just let me give you Kang in a nutshell series. So pick it up.
Okay.
Now, how long of a series is it going to be?
I think 6
like
issues.
A 4-issue mini or
5 or 6. It's going to be a mini series. They kind of announced it that way in previews. I think 6.
Cool.
Enough to have a trade ready during the push for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Of course.
I was just looking at the comments. It looks like we made John Runyon have a few mini heart attacks. It looks like I sold him on. Yeah, I didn't talk about Dark Avengers. It looks like I sold him on the Superman book, and then he had to take his headphones off as you started talking about the Magneto book. So some interesting developments there. Again, Caleb, I do apologize. In over 9 years of hosting, I have never disrupted the order before.
No.
Ever.
Oh, it's all good.
Oh my God. Oh, here's Lima with a comment.
Yeah. Limo. Kang is the most traditional foe of the Avengers. It's nice to see him get all this worldwide attention. It's a true House of Ideas villain. It really, Kang is definitely very much a classic 60s Marvel comic villain that just kept coming back. I mean, because they're, without a lot of changes. I think that's the thing. Like Kang's whole thing is that he changes every single time that they fight him. So, there's he could be anything in anyone, and it really, it always seems though to bring it back to that sort of classic 60s feel. And
like Doom, he can fight anybody.
Right.
Which is interesting. And especially with mentioning the Fantastic Four, when there was that realization that he was also Rama Tut.
Right.
Which was, nothing will ever be the same. 60s.
Never was the same after that summer.
Well, and just so my favorite thing, because he's probably my second or third favorite Avengers villain. Ultron's my first, but just the conceptualization of these characters really goes to show you how ahead of their time these creators were from Jack and Stan and Roy and Steve, because we didn't know a whole lot about quantum mechanics and quantum physics and time as a construct when they were writing the character of Kang. And so when you think about their ability to loop through time and go through wormholes and all these things, little blips that they had heard of, and in the 70s and 80s, it finds out that these are legit theories that people are now studying above and beyond. Ultron as an artificial intelligence before Wi-Fi or the internet or really the computer as we think of it today was realized. Just conceptualizations ahead of their time, and that's what I love about these early Avengers, especially the Avengers villains.
Yeah. Oh, I'm trying to think what my favorite Avengers villain is. Who? Can I go with a team?
Yeah.
Masters of Evil.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just cover all the bases there. You just win.
Yeah. Steve, do you have a favorite Avengers villain?
I don't have a favorite, but I have a one that I hate and is stupid. Korvac, I think, is probably the one.
Korvac is a great concept, but have you read those books?
I've read some of them. They're garbage. I think he's so dumb.
How to get it in there.
They throw in like a rape concept and like there's just so much in there that's just so blah. And no.
Interestingly, the best Korvac story was that initial What If story from the original series. That's the best Korvac if the Avengers lost.
I think I actually have that one.
Yeah, that one's actually pretty good, but yeah, the Korvac thing, woo, those are rough to get through. Those books.
Yep.
Mine's Ultron.
Yep.
Yeah.
Love Ultron. It's the family tie. Same thing with Wanda. It's the family.
Mm-hmm.
The family aspect of Ultron. It's like the bad side of the family.
And I'm thinking I like Grim Reaper. And even there's family through Simon. Through Wonder Man. Yeah. That's interesting. Oh, we lost him. Oh, maybe he's getting something.
Give him an idea.
Are we seeing something Ultron?
So
look at that.
Got that. That's Kelly Williams.
God, and you got like Perez hyper energy.
Oh yeah,
that's cool.
And then of course, Tyrell Cannon, giving me the Ultron good.
All right.
So hanging on my wall, just being awesome.
Very cool. Just being awesome.
What's it like to be able to have walls that you can hang things on?
Yeah, I have no idea. There's like one over there where
these are, I have eaves. I can't hang shit from eaves.
All right, fellas, it's a bit late, so let's start wrapping this episode up. And when we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears up, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment. In the bear community, if you find a fella attractive, you woof at him, and we do something very similar here, where we spotlight something which may be a comic book, but it may also be a film or a TV program or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener, or in this case, viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start as I always do with Steve. Steve, what is your Woof of the Week?
Well, I mean, I feel like I have to talk about TV because I watch a lot of it. Although it seems I'm actually behind Bill a little bit in my comic book TV viewing. I haven't seen any of Supergirl, and I haven't watched, I haven't watched this week's Titans yet. So, but I do have to because I know that we mentioned it briefly, but I do have to say because my husband and I held off on watching the last 2 episodes of Superman and Lois from the season until he was back in town. And oh my God, that's good TV. That's good TV. It's good comic book TV. It's well written. It's, it was fun. It was exciting. There were stakes. You felt them. There was emotional resonance. I was so impressed and so excited to see the way that they ended the season. And I'm pissed off. I'm going to have to wait until next year to see season 2. It's a weird number, 15 episodes or something for the season. So,
and unfortunately, you're going to have to wait till mid-season.
Yeah, it's going to be 2022 by the time we see
it. Because both of the main actors had previous commitments that initially should have been in their off season.
Well, we know how the
delays
kind of had to deal with all the stuff from the past year and a half. So, but I am so excited to see season 2 when it does finally premiere. I just think if you haven't watched the show, you really need to. It should be all. I think it'll probably all be streaming on HBO Max pretty soon. I'm not sure what the Netflix schedule is on there. I think maybe outside of the U.S. market, it'll be on Netflix to stream pretty soon. But if you have a chance, if you haven't watched it yet, I think from episode 1, you'll probably fall in love with it like I did. There are so many tearful moments. I'm like, this is a Superman show, but I'm crying. This is so well done. So, yeah. Superman and Lois, the season finale, excellent.
All right, cool. Over to Caleb. Caleb, what is your Woof of the Week?
So my wolf of the week goes out to an actual comic. Just I'm going to throw another one in there, and really to a comic artist, Mr. Kyle Starks, who I am a huge fan of. Love his stuff. Just fresh out yesterday, his book. It's a little OGN called Old Head. As you can see, it's horror related, horror themed. Now, full disclosure, I haven't read this yet because I just picked it up today. But it's Kyle Starks, so I know I'm going to enjoy it. Can't wait to see what he does. He gives you just everything you expect from Kyle Starks, with the funny and the weird and the wacky and the exaggerated, and just this amazing cartooning that he gives you, that is somehow both fresh and new and classic at the same time. So if you haven't pre-ordered this, you need to check it out. It's billed as a madcap action horror story of the world's toughest former pro basketball player returning home with his daughter to learn about destiny and his mother's mysterious past, while right next door Dracula and his goons are on the eve of their bloodiest day. Get a little blurb from Matt Kent, who I'm also a huge fan of. Big fan of blurbs, so that gives me a lot of faith. So go check this out. It's going to be fun.
All right, cool.
I'm excited. I have to read that.
Okay, well, my Wolf of the Week goes out to a TV documentary. It's one of a series of 5 that's coming out on Netflix. 3 are out. And this is a series called Untold, which is produced by the Way brothers, who directed that fantastic documentary series, Wild Wild Country. They have a number of other documentary filmmakers involved in this series. And I specifically wanted to talk about the second episode, which is called Deal with the Devil. And Deal with the Devil covers the story of Christy Martin, who, if you're unfamiliar with boxing or not, she probably is the most famous female boxer, or at least was until Ali's daughter got into the mix, and follows her story from being on the underbill for a very important Mike Tyson fight. Fantastic fight if you've ever seen this, and follows her story, the abuse that she encountered from her husband Jim, who eventually literally tried to kill her and is in jail for attempted murder at this point. Her struggles with drug addiction, her struggles with celebrity, her struggles with her sexuality. She actually is now married to a former female opponent from boxing, and it's also it's also excellent to see somebody who's come out from so much turbulence come out the other end as this remarkably focused and interesting individual. So if you have an opportunity and you have Netflix, go take a look at that. Untold, Deal with the Devil. There's 5 episodes. There's one about the Ron Artest, the Pacers fight, and the 3rd episode is about Caitlyn Jenner. I'm not exactly sure what the 4th and 5th episodes are, but as you can tell here, it kind of covers material that may be a little bit more darker than things that would be covered on 30 for 30. Really, really well done. And, even if you're not into sports, these are fascinating character stories, I think. And this one I thought was particularly arresting. So that's my Wolf of the Week, Untold, Deal with the Devil.
Cool.
All right. We're going to wrap this one up. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. If you want to write to us, please do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. If you want to listen to us, please do so by downloading us through iTunes, listening to us through Stitcher Radio, or catching us on many of the other podcatching platforms. And if you want to watch us, because we're devastatingly handsome and fascinating, you can do so on our YouTube channel. And if you're live with us now, thank you again for joining us. Love having people here week after week and contributing. So thank you again for watching. And if you do plug into the YouTube channel, please leave a review, because we always want to expand our profile on that particular platform. So until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
You're going to hear a wolf and an explosion. We'll be back real soon. Take care, everyone.
Wolf.